me first remember that this very year, 2019, we celebrate the 500th anniversary of one of the greatest geniuses of the mankind, Leonardo da Vinci. Actually, Leonardo died 1519. You see, for sure, one of the most known masterpieces, the center of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel at the Vatican, representing God on one side and the man on the other side. And they almost touch it physically each other. And I think this symbolically can be translated in the current days by another picture. We all know that the artificial intelligence and the supportive algorithm, as it was extensively demonstrated during this morning, and the associated machine learning that some people call thinking intelligence should be considered one of the most transformative forces of our time, being claimed that it shows a great opportunity to increase prosperity, to increase economic growth. This optimistic view about the advances of artificial intelligence is supported by three main achievements. One is the use of a vast amount of digital available data now. The second is a very powerful computing architecture. And third, the advances in techniques related to machines that are able, according to the experience, to perform better and better. Here you see the well-known timeline representing major achievements already approached, some of them already approached in this meeting. We talk about the word artificial intelligence was coined in 56 of the last century. The robot was first shown in 69, and for home tasks, 2002, there is this strange equipment to clean the house and moving everything differently that it was in the previous position. We talk about these developments related to vehicles, autonomous vehicles. We talk about robots to perform boring home tasks. We talk about more interesting ways for self-learning and for protective measures on cybersecurity and promising healthcare applications. And we'll talk a little bit later on healthcare applications. Only in the second part of the last decade, some social thinkers, some ethicists, some research, some investigators, and media start raising some alerts concerning the risks. Specifically in health, it was recently announced, and it is a picture taken from a very well-known Portuguese newspaper, Público, that a 3D printer can produce this heart, whole organ, from stem cells derived myocytes, previously derived from embryo cells. These are major contributions of the artificial intelligence in health domain for which no ethical constraints can be identified. And this is a list of categories of those benefits to render treatment smarter and more target-oriented, to help preventing life-threatening diseases, tools to assist caregivers and eventually related to old people, and devices to monitor patients' conditions in real-time basis. Moving from healthcare categories to medical specialties that one can anticipate to be replaced by artificial intelligence devices and machine learning devices. These are the three on the top of the list: dermatology, radiology, and pathology. The prophecy might be real. The capacity of integrating multiple indicators to produce a diagnosis was already demonstrated by a group of Stanford University, and the algorithms were trained on a data set of 1,300,000 skin lesions. And confidently, the machine can make, here in this case, the diagnosis of melanoma because of the irregular contour, because of small foci of inflammation, because of the heterogeneous pigment distribution, because of the white halo surrounding the lesion. This conclusion is that the machines appropriately prepared with deep learning systems can make diagnosis as correct as outstanding experts do. Stanford deep learning algorithm for this skin lesion was tested against 21 top-level experts in dermatology. So this is very relevant for a very common disease, mostly for screening of malignant lesion. The same is apparently true in relation to pathologists, the area where I came from, as was mentioned by Professor Celso Matos, and as well as for radiologists. And I know that most of the attendees to this meeting are radiologists. And these are voices, there are voices that recommend that radiologists and pathologists need not fear artificial intelligence, but in contrast, they must adapt incrementally to artificial intelligence, retaining their own services for cognitively challenging tasks. Doctors in this field, the artificial intelligence will disrupt the traditional role of doctors in these three specialties. But the transformation will not take place overnight. There are still remaining sizable obstacles that will need to be overcome. Whether the use of the artificial intelligence and machine learning to replace diagnoses made by professionals, some relevant ethical and legal issues came up and need to be addressed in relation to three main important points. One is informed consent. So how can we produce informed consent in these cases of diagnosis made by a machine or a treatment that is oriented by a machine? Second point is, and what about what we call by medical error? You see the machine is struggling, that made an error, and the radiologist says, it's up to you to solve the problem, not my problem, okay? And the third point is how systems can protect the individual privacy. But the critical ethical issues related to artificial intelligence are emerging mostly from the area of applications, potential applications in defense. Let us focus on this very sophisticated drone that was produced to take autonomous decisions. And these equipments are designated by the acronyms LAWS, which means lethal autonomous weapons systems. And this is the third generation of the warfare. 2 centuries ago, we had the gunpowder. Last century, the nuclear arms. And the point is these autonomous weapon systems select and engage targets without human intervention. They become lethal because the targets include humans and they can decide by themselves, the machines themselves, who is the target to be addressed. There is a serious warning considering these laws, because laws can violate fundamental principles of human dignity by allowing machines to choose whom to kill. For example, they might be tasked to eliminate anyone exhibiting a threatening behavior. What is a threatening behavior? And this is obviously a risk. And the relevant ethical and political decision in this particular case is whether or not, or whether to support or to oppose the developments of lethal autonomous weapons systems. And the political positions are not unanimous among countries. You see, Germany and France, they declare a position that opposed to United States or United Kingdom and Israel. The German and French view will not accept that decision over life and death is taken solely by an autonomous system. In contrast, US, UK, and Israel, at least these 3 countries that lead the development of laws, technology. They mention why to produce a new regulation. We have treaties. A treaty is not necessary because they already have weapons review processes that ensure compliance with international laws, which obviously might not be true. And we don't know nothing about the public positions recorded from China or from Russia or from India or from Pakistan. Now let's concentrate on ethical issues, no matter we are talking about applications of artificial intelligence, meaning health or mobility or environment or defense. The main goals of artificial intelligence and machine learning should always maximize the benefits and look very carefully to minimize the risks. And the principles need to be followed, meaning that the applications should be ethically valid, lawful, and robust. And these are the 3 pillars of the applications, no matter being in health, environment, or mobility, transport, or defense. Risks are not equal in any one of these applications. And this means by ethical that we have to ensure adherence to principles and values. And by lawful, this means complying with all the applicable laws and regulations existing and according at an international level. And robust, meaning attempting to avoid harm, social and technical perspectives on this concept. So, on one side, we have the principles and values relying on the human rights. And the main four principles of bioethics should be there, should be tested, should be validated in any one of the applications to be approved. Beneficence principle, meaning do good. Principle of non-maleficence, do not harm. Principle of autonomy, preserve. Capacity of decision, so human agency. Principle of justice, be fair. And a recently added new one, principle of explicability, meaning transparency. This is the requirements. Considering the topic as a urgent one, the European Union very recently created a group of outstanding people from different areas that very recently means March, late March, publish these guidelines for ethical guidelines for artificial intelligence. But what is interesting is this word trustworthy. Not only guidelines as a whole, but trustworthy. People should be confident about the application of these guidelines. And the purpose of this, the ethical purpose, is to indicate development, deployment, and use of the artificial intelligence, ensuring compliance with fundamental rights and applicable regulations, as well as respecting core principles and core values. And trustworthy is the fundamental ambition of the group of experts that produce this document that was taken as official document by European Union. So trustworthy meaning grounded in fundamental human rights, a focus on quality of life, on human autonomy and individual freedom. Trustworthy means, and I'm repeating, respecting fundamental rights, applicable regulation, and core principles of values, and all of these ensuring an ethical purpose of the application. And in addition, should be technically robust and reliable, since even with good intentions, a lack of technological mastery can cause unintentional harm. So, in the background for this, we have this document that's very relevant because it was signed by most of the countries is the so-called Oviedo Convention, is the Convention for Protection of Human Rights and Dignity with regard to application of biology and mention. So this document, that is our Bible. Fundamental rights are the basic foundation to ensure the primacy of the human being in a context of technological change. And these are the major targets approached in the European Union guidelines to ensure that the good purpose and the common good of society is not violated by any commercial or political interest. So the fundamental rights should be based on respect, freedom, democracy, equality, non-discrimination, and citizen rights. For those of you that are more interested in this topic, the document extensively describe and approach the requirements, 10 in total. I don't go on them because it will take a long time, but for the purpose of trustworthy artificial intelligence, these are the requirements that are approached in this document that I strongly recommend to all of you. Accountability, data governance, and you have been talking about data this morning, design for all, governance of autonomy, non-discrimination, respect for autonomy again, respect for privacy, robustness, and we talked this morning about this robustness issue, safety and transparency. And my take-home message is this one that we composed in 3 sentences. Acknowledge and be aware of the fact that while bringing relevant benefits to individuals and society, artificial intelligence also have or may have a negative impact. And one should remain vigilant for areas of critical concern, and the vast majority of them came from the applications for defense or military defense purposes. So in this regard, the artificial intelligence application should be what is called by human-centric, ensuring that human values are always the primary consideration, and forces us to keep in mind that development and use of artificial intelligence should not be seen as a mean in itself, but with the goal of increasing citizens' well-being. And this is very important, of course. So the take-home message, the critical, ethical question that everyone needs to pose when evaluating new equipment or a new solution based on artificial intelligence. And in my view, these are the critical questions that everyone should address. What is a good action? What is right? what is the good life? This is very important, especially in health issues. Quality of life, mental autonomy of freedom to live in a democratic society, because the issues of artificial intelligence are not always these issues related to health. We have to address also distributive justice. Who will benefit of the artificial intelligence? Who will benefit? And questions related to diversity and inclusion, meaning the ends to which artificial intelligence serves. Okay, probably this is the wrong pathway. So this is not the right pathway. This is the wrong pathway that everyone should avoid. And my final message is what we should do rather than what we can do with technology. Thank you very much.
I don't know if anyone wants to ask an ethical question. Yes, please.
Thank you for a fascinating and kind of dive into the depths of this. I'm a data scientist, so I wanted to ask a slightly more provocative question, which is to say, actually, if AI makes us better as clinicians, do we have an ethical imperative that we must use it?
It's a different.
I'm a data scientist, I would say.
Okay. But on your perspective, I would say yes. It's an imperative.
Yes.
What about the patient perspective? I mean, we're using a lot of their data. Where does that sit in this ethical framework?
I don't.
Where does the patient sit? We use a large amount of patient data in order to develop AI tools. And none of us so far have discussed consent and the role of patients.
Yeah.
And I wonder what your perspective is.
I think patients should be invited through, for instance, Patients Association to be part of this solution. So in my view, we have to invite people to share data, because without data we can go further on knowledge. But data is a private property of the patients. So our patients are very generous. You have to address the right message in order they give you the data. In case you can use data with anonymization, okay. But for some investigations, we have to have data, individual data, or updated data, and the data cannot be anonymized at all. So, in my view, data are a private property, but we should promote a discourse, a societal discourse, for people to provide data for the benefit of the future generations. Data is our fuel for new information and in research. Without data, nothing can be done.
Well, my feeling is that the issue of transparency is a major one, because nowadays in our digital world, humans, they tend to favor machine-related decisions in order to avoid contrary or conflictual human decisions. This is on one side of the coin. On the other side, patient preferences are against, most probably, against machine-related decisions. So how can we keep transparency in these conflictual or contradictory concepts?
Patients should be assumed as our partners. So I understand your question. How, in this transparency system, how can we use those data and patients are confident about the best use of application? I think we have to provide, in a pedagogical way, transparency in information. We are doing this and that. For what? And we need you. But in case you are not generous as you should be, you are treated in the same way.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes?
Hi, sorry. This is a question for rest of the panel members, actually. Arising from your talk, with artificial intelligence, we are heavily relying on this algorithm and image learning procedures and all that. Suppose we are in a scenario where something goes wrong. Where does the onus fall on? The machine or the radiologist, whosoever? Or maybe the pathologist, wherever we're doing the virtual biopsy?
Who should take the responsibility?
Exactly.
Whose
neck is on the line?
That's a critical question. But I think the point is who programmed the machine?
Well, we've got a lot of commercial interest here, so.
Otherwise, you have to create courts to take decisions about wrong decisions of machines.
Self-driving in cars, which is coming across. Like Tesla had all those accidents despite driving so many hours and all that. Well, Tesla takes the responsibility. Will rest of the companies take the responsibility? Do we have a law for that?
No.
So we are just open to all sorts of misuse and things like that, is that right?
I can hear you perfectly. I have...
Could you repeat your question?
I said we don't have any laws, any specific...
No, laws. There are no laws for the moment.
Right.
Okay. There are principles, but not specific laws.
Thank you.
Yes, Mo?
I wanted to make the point that, autonomous diagnostic device. Hello? Autonomous diagnostic device. I mean, most of the things are decision support tools. And I think from the survey this morning, most radiologists are prepared to make that commitment, a decision to be responsible. You will evaluate that tool against your needs and you think the performance is good enough and you are prepared to commit your workflow to that, then the radiologist is prepared to take that decision. I don't think we're at the stage where we have autonomous diagnostic devices but we certainly have to think about it, but we are not there.
Responsibility is not a legal issue. It is not an ethical issue. It's a legal issue. There are two different perspectives.